How's it going, guys? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast, a little solo pod to kick off your weekend. Before I get into any of the topics at hand, I feel like I owe a little explanation to the last episode that I posted, the one I labeled mini episode. First of all, if you listen to that or watch that, thank you very much. But it kind of ended abruptly, and it was pretty much shorter than most of the episodes I put out. If you watched it or listened to it, in the beginning I mentioned that it was a rainy Thursday or whatever day it was we recorded it. About 20 minutes into the conversation with Nick, the storm picked up, knocked out my internet. Luckily, it saved what we did record, and I didn't want to just totally trash it, but I didn't have internet to, do a solo segment to save it at the end. So I figured it was a decent enough conversation. Might as well post it. Hope you got some enjoyment out of it, those of you who did listen to it. We had other things planned. I think we're going to try to get him back on next week. We might even bring Hank on for that one too, do a three-person pod for some of the other topics that we had in mind. So that explains that. It kind of ended abruptly. I couldn't really do anything with it because I didn't have internet, so I just uploaded it the next day at work is what I ended up doing. So thank you again for listening to that, and I don't plan to end them abruptly or have them be nearly as short in the future. So that's what happened there. Again, thank you for listening to it if you did listen to the mini episode. So let's kick it off with this statement here. Baseball season is over. At least it is for me. As the Phillies fall in the NLCS, after last year's amazing run to the World Series, there was a minute there, especially after beating the Braves, that people thought, including myself, like, this is their year. Last year was a surprise. This year, they know what to expect, and they go up 2-0 in the NLCS. They go up 3-2 in the NLCS, but lose two straight at Citizens Bank Park to the Diamondbacks. And to call that a kick in the pants would be an understatement. I mean, I have no excuses. I'm not one to make excuses for any of my teams, but when you can punch your ticket to the World Series 2 nights in a row in your own ballpark, especially that ballpark, and you don't get it done, that's kind of on you. So hats off to Evan Longoria and the Diamondbacks. That's probably the only member of that roster that I'm familiar with going into it. And they will take on the Texas Rangers. Funny thing with that is, they got Jacob deGrom in the offseason. A lot of people thought that might be the thing that puts them over the top. He, of course, bows out, not very far into the season. He's been on the injury list since then. But the DeLand native could still get a World Series ring if the Rangers are able to pull it off against the Diamondbacks. That series kicks off as I'm recording this. I will not be watching, but to the Texas or Arizona fans or just baseball fans in general, enjoy the series. But yeah, definitely heartbreaker for the Phillies. Not sure where they go from here. Might have some shuffling of the roster at this point. Still a great run to, upset the Braves back-to-back seasons, win the pennant one year, and then make it to the NLCS in the next year. So it's not an awful season. This is about what people expected them to be at, but the journey to get there, you got to think like Bryce Harper coming back from injury, learning to play first base. If you've never seen Moneyball, learning first base is incredibly hard. And I think he did, as good a job as you could ask of somebody, playing that for maybe not the first time ever, because I assume Bryce played like all positions growing up because he was kind of a prodigy. So, but I assume first time in a long time. So that, that happened. Some of the injuries there, some players getting older, but just going cold in those last two games. I think Bryce was 0 for 7. The big hitters were like 2 for 17 down the stretch. And you're not going to win a game that way. I don't care who it's against. It could be against the first round Marlins again. If you only get 3 runs in the last 2 games, like, good luck. Like, granted, there was chances to win. Not so much the first one at home. That one almost seemed over before it started, which was very strange. But there was opportunities to win Game 7, and they definitely slipped away. So again, not no ill will towards Arizona. Definitely didn't see that coming. Whether them being at this space or winning the pennant and punching their ticket, but we will see how that shakes out over the next couple of days. So that's kind of the curtains on baseball season here for a little bit, depending on some other guests that I have on here soon. That will kind of curtain the baseball talk here for a little bit. Of course, my minor league season, the Tortugas, will start a week or a month or so before major league season. So as we get closer to April, there'll be more baseball talk picking back up. But that is what we have for this. So more questions than answers for the Phillies going in to the offseason. Transitioning from the diamond to the hardwood, NBA season has tipped off, and I'm just going to highlight the Magic's awesome performance in the first game against the Houston Rockets. 30-point win. Don't get a lot of those in Orlando these days, let alone on opening night. Everybody played great. The atmosphere was awesome. Unfortunately, I don't get to watch the Magic nearly as much as I'd like to because they have that Bally Sports contract. And, if they keep this up, I may have to pay the $20 a month just to watch the Magic. But in years past, I wasn't going to do that because, they were a pretty directionless franchise. But you're starting to see more of that now, more direction, I should say. And everyone knows how good Paulo Banchero is. Everybody knew that coming out. Number one overall pick. After like a week or two, they're like, yeah, they made the right pick there. But the biggest surprise, of course, is just continuing is Franz Wagner, who went from, that's an oddball pick to that might be a pretty good piece to that's a starter to, in this offseason, helping Germany win I don't know if they call it the World Cup or the World Championship, but beating the United States. I'm not going to lie and say that was like the A team United States team, but a lot of good NBA players. Paulo was included in that, actually. So that is two, pieces that might be your 1 and 2. I think they're going to be the 1 and 2 no matter what. There's just a little bit of discussion. I'm going to start it now on who the one might actually be. And if they're both as good as advertised, it won't really matter who's 1 and who's 2. But the fact that it's gotten to that point is pretty awesome. And Franz's brother, Marcus, is also on the team. So that's pretty cool to have some brothers playing on the same NBA team. I don't think that happens very often. I know Giannis's younger brother was on Milwaukee. I don't know if he still is. I believe he still is. So, you see it sometimes, but not super often. It's not like, college basketball, which is about 12 days away, by the way. So that's another thing to look into for college basketball. Could be a rough season ahead for UCF going into the Big 12, but I'll remain optimistic until I have reasons not to. But aside from that, I watched a little bit of the Warriors Suns game that tipped off, and man, it is going to take forever to get used to seeing Chris Paul in a Warriors uniform. Some guys, you just don't transition well into other uniforms. Like Durant's moved around a lot. That when he went to Phoenix, I was just like, oh yeah, there it is. Like that, it was normal. It felt normal. Every uniform he's worn seems pretty legit. But that used to be the case with Chris Paul. But there's something about that Warrior uniform that I'm like, that's going to take some getting used to. And of course, there's been plenty of people jumping around this year. One guy that was not in a uniform to tip off with his team is James Harden. I still don't know what's going on there with the Sixers. And here's and I feel bad saying this, I don't really care anymore. You can only give someone like that so much attention. And like, I guess he'll end up getting traded to wherever he's trying to go. I don't know what team is left that has does he want to go back to Houston? You've heard that story. I'm pretty sure his Durant, friendship is dwindled, and then the Westbrook thing didn't work either. I don't know what of his, because that's his last 3 moves is because the star player on that team vouched for him. And I don't know what star player is left to vouch for James Harden to get to another team. And for whatever reason, he doesn't seem that he wants to stay in Philadelphia. And it's one thing to not want to stay there, but when you don't, it's kind of the equivalent of like, well, let's go out to eat. I don't know what I want to eat, but we still got to figure out something. So you figure it out, James. Like, let's do this. So that's a story that's going to drag on, and I have no real interest in following it. I think eventually something will happen, but that's about all I got for James Harden. And it's, of course, obviously too early to say, this team's going to be good, this team's going to be bad. I'm sure there's already people filling out their playoff brackets 1 game into the year, some 2 for some teams. I think a lot of teams are playing their second game of the season tonight. So clearly too early for that. There's going to be moves. There's going to be shaking. Milwaukee looked good. They had a 1-point win against the Sixers after I think they lost on opening night. But Dame seemed to fit in there pretty well. He hit a clutch 3 to bury the Sixers late. So that's going to be a good story to look for. Is that security at the point guard position going to be what Milwaukee needs to win their second title in, what would it be, 3 years? But again, it's early, so, to all those who celebrate the start of the NBA season, I mean, there's people that think it's too long, that, they've gotten to the point where the regular season doesn't mean a whole lot. There's people that say started at Christmas. Every year I'm getting more and more into that. Like, we could start it on Christmas Day or closer to Christmas, because it just gets it's fun. Like, I've been watching games and the midweek things help, but it's going to get buried a little bit by the World Series. It's going to get buried by the NFL on the weekend. Like, even if they waited till after Thanksgiving, I think would be great. The NFL owns Thanksgiving, of course. So if you do the weekend after, like if Black Friday kicked off the NBA season, not that they're not getting enough publicity and people don't know what's happening, but as they fight for real estate in this world, and the NFL makes their season as long as possible, even in the off season, they beat out some other sports publications. Christmas Day might be a little too far. It's always been an NBA holiday. Now the NFL is kind of creeping into that too. So while that's the case, I think Black Friday would almost be better. They could shift things a little bit, make the season. There's been talks, is 72 the right number? Because these guys sit out so much. But of course, the argument to that is, if you make it if guys are playing 60 games when it's 82 game season, if you make it 72, are they only going to play 53? Like, are they just going to whatever you give them, whatever inch you give them, they'll take a mile? And of course, there's reasons for some of these guys, right? Injuries and whatever. But I think we all know that it's pretty obvious that there's plenty of people that are not that are just taking the chance to, load management may have gone overboard a little bit here. But we'll see how this season works. And if we do hit a point of the season being shortened. And while we talk about the NBA tipping off, the NHL has also taken to the ice. So to all the hockey fans out there, shout out to you guys. I know it's a great time here. I never admit to be a huge hockey expert, but there will be some hockey content on the channel coming up here pretty soon. That's what we in the business call a tease. So look out for that. That'll be happening. Let's talk a little NFL right now. We'll start with the Eagles. I don't like to overly talk about my team on the show. Normally I have a guest to talk about other things with, but I'm the only one here right now. So let's do this. Let's just talk Eagles for a little bit. They're sitting at 6-1 after an embarrassing loss to the Jets, in which Jalen Hurts had 3 turnovers, I think 2 near the red zone. It flashed me back to when he had 3 turnovers in the red zone against New York, right? That was the thing. That was when I was like, I'm done with this guy. Everything I thought about this guy was he's not the guy. He's not terrible, but he's not great either, right? That was my thought there for a while. And since then, he's been nothing short of like an MVP candidate last year. And then this year, while his stats have had issues, the turnovers have been a little head scratching. The team has been winning, and you can't argue with the wins. It's when the dam breaks, and not only did you lose, but you gave it away late at the end. It's one thing if the Jets came in, punched you in the mouth, you didn't expect it. You lose 16 to 13 or something. They won 20-14 because of towards the end of the game, it looked like there was a let's let them score type mentality, and then we can go down the field and score. They were not given enough time for that, but they were up. They were up 14-3, 14-0, something like that. It was like they started off great. One more touchdown ices this game in the second quarter. Like they were not going to score that many points, and then you had to keep the ball in the air to keep the ball moving. We are a running team. And the fact that they didn't just let Swift grind it out, and granted the Jets have a good defense, that has something to do with that. But coming off of that, of course, people weren't happy about it. Obviously, 5-1 was 5-1. You can only be so upset about it. It's one bad game. It's the same day that the Browns, without Deshaun Watson, beat the 49ers. This is not college football. You are going to lose games. All these guys get paid. I was annoyed the day it happened. I got over it pretty quick. Like by the next day, I was fine. It's the NFL. I'm not worried about one game, but I was worried how they'd respond to that one game. And it was just what the doctor ordered. Kelly Green jerseys coming up against the Dolphins in the Sunday night game the week after. Great game for the Eagles. Really put into perspective what has been otherwise been a great Dolphins offense, led by Raheem Mostert and Tua. And yes, Tyreek Hill got deep once and scored a touchdown. But aside from that, they only gave up another field goal because they had 17 points, and one of those was what I'm calling a tip 6, where it was tipped at the line when Jalen went to throw, and then it was brought back for a touchdown. So for the defense to have that kind of performance, and the Eagles put up enough points really to win that game twice over, I think it was 31-17, and again, 7 of that coming from the Dolphins defense. So they were swarming. They got to Tua. They knocked him down, got sacks on him. That is how you want them to respond. The Kelly Green jerseys look fantastic. Everything you want in a jersey. If you want a deeper conversation about the Kelly Green, go back a few episodes where me and Hank really break it down. And then the week after, Hank actually modeled the jersey for us because he himself did order one. I plan to get one in the future. We have one more Kelly Green jersey game against another AFC East opponent against the Bills later this season. But yeah, just a great way to bounce back. And again, that's what makes it one game. If we'd have beaten the Jets like we were supposed to, and then we lose a shootout to the Dolphins, we're in the exact same place. But now you have this great win on your resume. The Dolphins are considered probably a top 3 team in the AFC, might even be top 2, depending on who you talk to. So again, it's not college football, but you look at that as a signature win. That's them beating a team that's expected to be in maybe the Final 4 at the end of the season. So definitely a great one for the Eagles to come back after that just disappointing performance against New York. And the Eagles were not done winning for the week because a few days after that they play Washington on Sunday at 1:00. But between the Dolphins game and this Washington game, the Eagles make a splash in the trade market. They go back to Tennessee. I don't know why Tennessee Titans answer Howie's phone calls anymore. If I saw that number on my phone, it's off. It's down. I'm not answering anymore. But for whatever reason they did, Tennessee is clearly looking to unload some of their more expensive pieces. This has been a talk for Kevin Byard, safety, that has come up since the offseason. That's a name that's been mentioned. He's from Philly. He grew up originally in Philly. He was from Arizona and other things too, but he grew up in Philly. Him and Budda Baker were the two names safety wise that it's like, look, keep an eye on this. The Eagles may try to make a move here. Budda Baker got injured. He came back. Those rumors heated up again. And then all of a sudden, bam, Kevin Byard is a Philadelphia Eagle, and he should make his debut against Washington this week. I'm looking for some big hits on him. You mentioned how he was like a big Brian Dawkins fans growing up, weren't we all, Kevin? But it is wild to me that Tennessee continues to pick up the phone. I mean, if the Georgia Bulldogs are like the Eagles' AA club, Tennessee is starting to become the AAA club because after what happened with AJ Brown, and the other weird thing, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's all rumors and innuendo at this point, but the Derrick Henry may be on the market, and there's been set talks that the Eagles were looking at that too, like potential deals are floating around the Twitter timeline. That would make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, DeAndre Swift has done great things in this run game. I don't think anybody gets worse adding a Derrick Henry to their team, but I don't think it's a necessity. And if you are going to use that draft capital, I think you need it on a third receiver. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are amazing. And then Dallas Goedert can do a great job too at tight end. But when you don't have a lot of depth behind it, it can make it hard to force it to those two guys. They did go out and sign Julio Jones, who looked just great in the Kelly Green. He made one catch for 6 yards. Not a huge deal. It's cool that he's there. I think if you get a guy ahead of him, like a playmaking third receiver, I think he'd be a very valuable fourth receiver. He's not going to play a whole lot. You put him in the red zone, try to throw a few up to him, help him nurture and mentor the other guys. Julio's great. It's cool that he's here, but he's not the answer at the third receiver unless he just comes out of nowhere, thinks it's 2018 again, and he's jumping over guys, one-hand catches, corner toe taps back in the end zone, all that thing. Would be great to see. That's not what I think would happen there. So cool pickup for Julio, the trade for Kevin Byard. So the Eagles are not content after, and this happened last year too. Howie went out and boosted the D lineman after that weird fluky loss to Washington last year. And we already beat Washington once this year, so we are not going to let that. And that was a game. That was a game to the final end. That was a Hail Mary. Not even a Hail Mary, just like a shot to the end zone at the end of the game type game. So they know not to overlook Washington, even though on paper, like, they should be okay. But they got plenty of good players. They got Scary Terry. Sam Howell has been up and down. It's almost like the game he played against the Eagles made them think they had something they didn't in him. But we'll see what happens with that. So that'll be a good one. Come. And there's plenty of other great games for this weekend. Since it's just me on today's episode, I'm going to do something a little different. I may start doing this moving forward. I think it'll be a good thing to keep on record here. Not that I don't have the record here, but I've created a couple years ago. Did the ESPN Pick'em Games group. The group is NSB Picks. If anyone's interested, you probably can't really see that, but whatever. NSB Picks is the group if you want to join. I know it's mid-season now, but if you want to, get in there and keep track of your picks, you can't win the season because you're 7 weeks behind, but you can win a couple weeks here and there. Is what's going on there. But I'm just going to quickly go through the picks that I made for this week. Quickly, I am 60-45 on the year. Not as great as years past. 2 years ago, I won this whole league with like a 87% correct rate. It was incredible. Last year, I finished second. I was in like the mid-high 70s, something like that. I'm at 74.8 percentile right now, which overall is good, but the number is 60-45. I'm usually a bit higher than that. It's been a rough one to start the year. I'll be the first to admit that. I've not had the best picks, so take this, for what it's worth. I did have Buffalo beating the Bucs last night on Thursday Night Football. That pick got locked in. They won that game 24-18. Wild finish to that one, too. There was that Hail Mary that Chris Godwin, I don't know if he lost it in the lights or what happened, but he sticks his hand out and the ball is like right there. If he had any tracking on that ball, he catches it and they might win with the extra point. So it was closer than I expected, but the Bills did pull it out there. Going for 2 for the Bucks on the first possession, not the second possession, was incredibly ballsy and almost paid off. So hats off to them. They fought the good fight. Let's go through the next game. Let's do the 1 o'clocks. I have Cowboys over the Rams. I have the Vikings over Green Bay. I don't have a huge, because they already played once, I believe, and they don't have Justin Jefferson. But I do think Minnesota, Green Bay is spiraling right now. It's kind of sad to see. I think I mentioned, my in-laws went to my brother-in-law, and my sister went to Lambeau for the first time this year. And it was that Detroit game, and that was not a pretty game for a lot of it. They came back around a little bit. They made a game of it, but it was, of all games to go to, of all years to go to, this might not have been it. So, but the Packers have been spiraling. People don't feel quite as great about Jordan Love as you would think they would have after the first couple starts. Totally understandable. We'll see if they can correct it. The Falcons, I'm going to give them this one over the Titans because I just feel like the mentality of the Titans locker room, I think if you look on paper, it's pretty even, but I don't think they like what they see when they look in the mirror right now. They don't know what direction they're going. I've been saying I think the Falcons are a quarterback away. While Desmond Ridder isn't awful, I think if they have someone a little more polished, a little more poised, they could really pull it off. But they're winning games. They're winning games close. You can't argue with that at all. So I'm giving them the win over Tennessee. New Orleans, I'm picking over the Colts due to, I like Gardner Minshew a lot, and this is not my take. This is one that I heard that I just agreed with. But Gardner Minshew is the equivalent of like a middle reliever pitcher. If you don't have to start him, if he can come into a game late and pull one out for you, it's better than him starting a game. He's like 2 or 3-9 as a starter, but when he comes in mid-game, like he ends up doing better. But when he's your guy to start with, hasn't been great historically, so I'm actually going to go. They're technically the underdogs here, but I'm going with the Saints. The Dolphins I have over the Patriots. I don't think I have to explain that one too much. Much like the Jets over the Giants. Giants played better last week. They beat Washington. They made it a. I think it was like 14-7 in the second quarter, and then the game ended 14-7. Like I don't know what happened in those remaining 2.5 quarters, but Giants hold on. Giants win. Good for them. I have the Jags over the Steelers. You can never count out the Steelers. I don't care how bad they are. And this has always been like a low-key rivalry here with the Jags and the Steelers. No reason for it right now. But the Jags have been rolling a little bit after that trip up against Houston, which always happens. It doesn't matter how, the Jags are getting it together and they're about to play the, 2-win Houston team. Doesn't matter. And Houston's better now than they've been in a while with C.J. Stroud. But I do have Jacksonville over Pittsburgh. Picking the Eagles against Washington, not a homer pick. I think most people would do that. I have no problem picking against the Eagles when it's necessary. I don't find it necessary here. The 0-6 Carolina Panthers look to change that against the Houston Texans. I just mentioned Houston's looked as good as they've looked in a while. They seem to have gotten the quarterback right in the draft this year. C.J. Stroud is the most impressive one, I think, so far out of the ones that we've seen rookie-wise, and that's why they will win. The Cleveland Browns, this one's close to me. They're actually the underdog here. But after that big win against 49ers, this is their chance to keep it rolling. I understand they don't have Deshaun Watson, but I believe they're was it PJ Walker, right, that played? Like at this point, he knows what he's working at. If you can beat the Niners with this team, you can certainly beat the Seahawks. And the Seahawks are a good feel good story. I could see them winning this, but I'm giving it to Cleveland. For what would be the 17th time in a row, shocker here, I have the Chiefs beating Denver after they picked up a win last week. Nobody looked better this past week than the Ravens, and they destroyed the Lions that everybody's high on. And I don't think the Lions season's over or anything. I think they'll bounce back, plenty, and they'll be able to move forward here. But the Ravens are gonna probably throttle the Cardinals here. The Cardinals were a cool story with Josh Dobbs and everything. They beat the Cowboys. That's to record their only win this season. They'll get more. I don't think they're going to be a 1-16 team or whatever it might be, but it's not going to be this week. I think the Ravens are going to pull that one out. I think the Niners are pissed, and the only interesting thing about this one is it looks like Brock Purdy is not playing. Do I think Sam Darnold can pull out a game against the Bengals? I do, because the Bengals have not been consistent all year. I have the Niners picked, but now as I'm looking at this, I'm like, do do I go Cincinnati? What do you guys think? Let me know before the game airs. Obviously, if you can comment it before Saturday. This is the most intriguing one for me this week. But I think I'm going to stick with the Niners. But it could be very, very close, especially the Sam Darnold thing. Could be interesting. We'll see how that goes. The Chicago Bears had a feel-good story winning with a backup quarterback. They're playing the Chargers. Chargers got to beat somebody, right? I think they'll find a way to win this one. The Chargers, I think we can all agree, roster-wise, is way better than the 2-4 record that they have, which is the same record that the Bears have. Actually, is that 2-5? They're 2-5, so they're technically worse than the Chargers. I'm going to give the Chargers this one. If they don't win this one, they're already in trouble. They'll be in even deeper trouble. And then on Monday night, I mentioned the Lions got throttled against the Ravens. They look to get back on track against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think this will be a fight till about halftime, but I definitely have the Lions pulling that one out. So hoping to win the week this week in the picks group. Again, feel free to join. It's a little too late to win the year, but you can keep track of your daily, regardless of joining our group or not. It's fun to keep your picks, and you have a decent idea on how you've been keeping up with the season and everything. Again, winning record with picks right now, I'm pretty low. We got a good group this year. I think I'm like 6th place out of like 8 people right now, but those points are only by like, I think first place and last place is separated by like 10 games. So it's not a huge thing to one bad week and one good week will get you right back up there. So I got faith. Like I said, 2 years ago, I won the league. Last year, 2nd place. We'll see how it falls this year. The only other thing, I think I had one more thing I wanted to cover in this solo pod. And I didn't even know how much I wanted to get into it. It's this Michigan sign stealing scandal. It's still ongoing. I don't want to say too much about it, but because if you're in the right circles on Twitter and everything, this is all you're hearing about. But then if you're not, you're not going to hear a lot about this on like College Football Live or Sports Center. You're hearing a little bit, but you really got to dig to find it. Basically, there's this Jim Harbaugh buddy of his, something Chambers, I think was his name. He's going to all these big games. He's buying tickets on both sides of the sideline just so he can like film the other team's sideline sign stealing. And I think we can all agree that sign stealing of some level has been in every sport: baseball, basketball, well, probably not basketball, but football and baseball, for a long, long time. And I think most of us can agree that there's a difference between noticing while you're on the sideline, every time the guy in the green hat does this, they run a QB draw, and you feel confident enough about that when you see him do this, that you guard against QB draw. That is not sign stealing. That is sign decoding, I would call it. But this is a lot more intricate. This is a guy that Jim Harbaugh claims he didn't know, but there's plenty of evidence of this guy being on the sideline and telling guys what to do in mid-play. This could get ugly. There are 2 camps to this. There's people say this is no big deal. Everybody does it. And while everybody might try to sign decode, I don't think a lot of people sign steal, right? And I think that's the big difference here. There are people, the other, there's like 3 camps. There's everybody does it, not a big deal. There is the, even if they have this, they still have to make the tackle. They still have to, make the throw, make the catch, get in the end zone, right? While that's true, you're not talking about a team of bums that would be 3-9 otherwise going 11-1 because of sign stealing, right? The gap isn't that wide. It would not affect, if UTEP could steal Ohio State's signs, pretty sure they're still losing by a couple touchdowns. So to that extent, those people are right. Where they're not right is Michigan is like Mr. 9-3, right? Before Harbaugh and even the first several years of Harbaugh, right? When the gap is this close, those sign stealings, can make a huge difference. I take it back to the Spygate Patriots, right? People said that wasn't a big deal. They think they would have won anyway. Well, when you win all your Super Bowls by a last-second field goal in that first iteration, that Spygate series, the first 3, I like to, differentiate that the Patriots had their Spygate scandals for their first 3 Super Bowls. Then they didn't win any for a decade immediately after. And then they went on to win, 3 more about a decade later. So, yeah, when you're winning your Super Bowls by a last-second field goal, you can't tell me that the Spygate type sign stealing, whatever thing doesn't make a difference. because 3 points is all it takes. One play could result in the lack of 3 points or getting 3 points. So I think this is a huge deal. There are people, do I think Michigan's going to get the death penalty? No, because they're Michigan. And I don't know, there's very few schools. Again, if like I don't like to throw teams on. I'll just stick with the UTEP example. Sorry, Miners, but if UTEP all of a sudden was like 10-2 this year, 11-1 the year after, and then 12-0 out of nowhere, and they found out about this, that's a death penalty level thing. It's like the SMU thing, right? That wasn't going to happen. Paying players, SMU got banned. That wasn't going to happen to Texas. That wasn't going to happen to A&M even. So while I don't think this is like a death penalty type thing, don't be shocked if Harbaugh pulls an Urban Meyer and right as the Flames are getting a little too close to his feet, he dips out and he's the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders next year or something. I wouldn't be shocked for any of that. That's just my general stance on this. It is a big deal. It's not a program killing deal at the end of the day. I think that, much like the Houston Astros thing, because like the Patriots got next to nothing wrong with their sign stealing thing. The Astros had to purge their organization of like most of the people that had to do with it. Granted, the coach still stayed there and the star player still stayed there, so that bugs me to this day. The Dusty Baker, the manager, just retired, so really you're down to Jose Altuve and like a handful of other people there for that. But I would put it up to that, and they will deserve to be the villains of their sport the way the Astros were, the way the Patriots should have been. For at least a little while. And again, if people go, it's like the Penn State thing, right? The thing that happened to Penn State was terrible. But when all those people were removed, you don't take it out on the kids that are wearing the uniform. And granted, that's different because what happened at Penn State had nothing to do with on-field stuff. This has everything to do with on-field stuff. But, what you don't want to see is the NCAA take this into account 4, 5, 6, 7 years later. All the wins of Harbaugh from this time to this time have been vacated, and the Big Ten title, and then like there's a bowl ban to these kids. There's kids that are in middle school right now that will feel effects of this when the NCAA gets around to doing something. And there's nothing stopping the Big Ten from doing something about it sooner. Because, while the NCAA deals with 130 football programs and 1,000 entities across all sports, the Big Ten has, 12, 14 teams to worry about. Like, they could do something. They could ban something. They can probably reduce scholarships. It's a matter of if you want to or not. Because at the end of the day, this is Michigan. They're going to have big noon kickoff there tomorrow, I believe. Michigan, Ohio State's the biggest thing that they can offer this country from a TV standpoint. So, of course, you don't – if you're them, you don't want to deal with Michigan, but you might have to. So, more will come out about this story, I'm sure, but I just wanted to give my 2 cents while I wrap up here. But that's probably going to do it here for the solo pod, guys. Again, apologize for the mini episode. Hope this solo one makes up for it. I'm looking to bring Nick back to get to all the topics we wanted to get to last week. Next week, again, hoping to bring Hank on there too. We want to try something a little different, a little more less reactionary and a little more evergreen. We got a couple sports fans topics that we want to talk about, and I'll give you the main one just so you guys can sit and chew on it. Maybe put your comments in the next one. Is when is it okay to celebrate? And what I mean by that is, what's banner worthy? What's ring worthy? What's t-shirt worthy? What's all that? And it probably differentiates by sport. So, just think on that for a little bit, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Take care.